Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger, go for deploy.
Space and everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good evening and welcome to our live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew-8 mission as it returns to Earth. Dragon Endeavour departed the International Space Station at 2:05 p.m. Pacific Time on October 23rd. On board Crew-8 are NASA astronauts Dominick, Michael Barratt, and Jeanette Epps, as well as Rocosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin, and they are now on their way to the targeted Splashdown site just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX, and joining me today from NASA Communications is Sandra Jones. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. It is so great to be here. It's always a pleasure to be here at SpaceX. Upon departing the International Space Station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns, and the crew then had a rest period and has since kicked off.
Dragon.
And we might hear some communications back and forth with the crew on Endeavour as well as to the ground. So we'll stand by for those. But the crew did have the opportunity to have a rest period and has since kicked off preparations following their undocking for re-entry, including getting into their spacesuits and successfully performing a leak check of those spacesuits. This next phase of the mission is when things will really start to amp up, and Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew-8 home.
Yeah, exactly. First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct attitude and then jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized lower part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom end of Dragon, and that is where the heat shield is located. Of course, in order to expose the heat shield and get ready for atmospheric reentry, we're going to jettison that trunk.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will then put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. The burn will last about 9 minutes once it starts, and that deorbit burn does use the Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the 4 located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee, or the very highest point of Dragon's current orbit around the Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida. Splashdown is planned for 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:29 a.m. Eastern, so just about an hour and 11 minutes or so from now.
Now, before we go any further, let's take a minute to meet our crew that is returning this evening.
Commander Dominick was born and raised in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and is married to Faith Dominick, and they have 2 daughters. Matt earned a Master of Science degree in Systems Engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he was designated as a naval aviator in 2007. He's also made 2 deployments to the North Arabian Sea and has flown close air support missions in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. He has more than 1,600 hours of flight time in 28 different aircraft, 400 carrier-arrested landings, and 61 combat missions. And this was his very first space flight.
Dr. Michael R. Barratt, Crew-8 pilot, was selected by NASA in 2000. He's the only member of the Crew-8 cohort who's been to space before, as part of Expedition 1920 in 2009 and STS-133 in 2011. Prior to Crew-8, he spent 212 days in space. He is board certified in internal and aerospace medicine and has been awarded numerous times for his contributions to space medicine research. Michael lives in League City, Texas, with his wife Michelle and their 5 children. Personal and recreational interests include sailing, boat restoration, writing, and cooking good food in harsh or remote places.
Next up is Mission Specialist Jeanette Epps. This was also her first space flight. She's a Syracuse, New York native and was a NASA fellow during graduate school. She then worked for Ford Motor Company, where she received a U.S. patent for her research into auto collisions and countermeasure systems. Then, after leaving Ford, she joined the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, for 7 years, working as a technical intelligence officer before she became a NASA astronaut in 2009. She has a Master of Science and Doctorate of Philosophy in Aerospace Engineering, and she is also a twin.
Mission specialist Alexander Grebenkin was also a first-time flyer for this particular mission. He graduated from the Irkutsk Military Aerospace Engineering Institute in 2002, majoring in the engineering, maintenance, and repair of aircraft radio navigation systems. He then attended the Moscow Technical University of Communications and Informatics, graduating with a degree in radio communications, broadcasting, and television. He was accepted into the Cosmonaut Corps in 2018 and served as flight engineer while on board the space station. So right now, we now know a little bit more about the crew flying on Crew-8. Let's talk a little bit about the development of the capsule that they are flying in. So for those that might be unfamiliar, they're flying in a Dragon Crew capsule. Development of Dragon 4 Crew actually started with the Dragon cargo spacecraft. The Dragon was designed from the beginning to fly humans to space, so much so that even the very first window, even though there were no people on board, it had a window. Before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are suitable for flying people, and then put both vehicles through thousands of tests to prove their safety. Dragon itself is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers. It is the only spacecraft currently flying that is capable of returning significant amounts of cargo to Earth, and is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the space station. Dragon also is fully autonomous, which means that it can fly itself, but it also features full manual override capabilities in case of an emergency. Now, standing at almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk to the top of the nose cone there, Dragon is composed of 2 main elements. The spacecraft, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and that's the portion at the top, as well as an unpressurized section known as the trunk, which we spoke a little bit about earlier. At the top of the pressurized section of the spacecraft is the nose cone, and that protects the docking system and also the Guidance Navigation Control System, or GNC system. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Dragon spacecraft the entire time, unlike the previous version of Dragon, where the nose cone, we jettisoned the nose cone, and ultimately keeping that attached helps us toward our reusability efforts. Now, opposite of the nose cone is the trunk. That is that unpressurized section at the bottom that I mentioned. It provides attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon spacecraft, and for cargo. One half of the trunk is actually covered in solar panels that provide power to Dragon during flight and while it's on station. That is the black side of the trunk. The other half, which is painted white, contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system to space using our new Pika tiling technology. The trunk now also has new aerodynamic fins, which provide stability in the event of an emergency abort. Now, I mentioned abort. In the event of an event such as that, Dragon is outfitted with 8 Super Draco thrusters, and those would power the astronauts to safety. Dragon's Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Dragon and gives the crew the ability to quickly separate from Falcon 9 and safely escape from the time of the launch all the way to orbit. This is a feature that no other spacecraft in history has possessed. Dragon is also equipped with 16 Draco thrusters, and those are used to orient the spacecraft during the mission, including apogee and perigee maneuvers, orbit adjustment, and attitude control. If you tuned in to some of our docking or undocking webcasts, you might have actually seen some of those Draco thrusters firing live in action. Now, each Draco thruster is capable of generating 90 pounds of force in the vacuum of space. I want to point out here we have our first views inside the Dragon capsule with our Crew-8 members. It seems as though everyone is sitting very comfortably inside their seats as they await their return back to Earth. Now, the seats that they are sitting in there, the spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members, like I mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Obviously, you can see today we're only flying 4. The modular seats, these are modular seats, and they can be removed and replaced by additional cargo, which is what we do when we fly 4-person crews. The seats themselves are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board, meaning the bucket that basically their bodies rest in, as well as the footrests and the armrests, all have the ability to customize the length of each of those pieces so that everyone remains comfortable and safe while they are in their seats. Their great view, first view of the morning, of the control panels. These are centered between the pilot and commander's seats. So this view here, we have pilot Mike Barratt on the right-hand side and Commander Dominick on the left-hand side. Those control panels consist of 3 touchscreen displays, and they allow the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually, even while wearing the gloves that they have on. These suits that they are wearing are also custom designed and custom built here in-house at SpaceX, and the gloves were specially designed to use with these touch screens to really emphasize the look and feel of a spacecraft of the next spaceflight generation. This particular capsule, we mentioned earlier that this is Capsule Endeavour. I personally have some really fond memories of this capsule, as this was the Demo 2 capsule that first flew Bob and Doug on the very first mission that carried humans into space in a Dragon capsule. I personally have worked inside this capsule while we were doing the initial build of it. I remember looking out that window right there at the feet of Jeanette Epps, and it's so incredible to see that this capsule is now about to complete its 5th spaceflight mission. It's truly something, isn't it, Sandra?
It is, and another fun fact about this particular spacecraft, Endeavour is completing the longest cumulative time in space that any U.S. spacecraft has ever experienced, and this is the longest single space flight for a U.S. spacecraft ever, at 235 days in space, of which 234 were docked to the International Space Station. So to prepare for some of the upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously. First, it's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator that you were discussing, that white portion on the trunk. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable for Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander during their re-entry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk in preparation for trunk separation. Now, Dragon Endeavour has flown on several other missions for NASA, including, as you mentioned, Demo 2, the first launch of Dragon Endeavour on May 30th, 2020 to the International Space Station. Next up, it flew Crew-8, which launched in April of 2021. That was actually the first flight I ever got to see in person at the
awesome.
Kennedy Space Center, so that one is a little memorable to me.
That was my second that I got to see in person.
Oh, it was just beautiful. It was a pre-twilight launch, gorgeous.
The orbit sequence start in 2 minutes.
Dragon copies.
And with that call down from the core here in Hawthorne up to Matt Dominick, the commander of Endeavour, letting us know that we are nearing the deorbit sequence start. Things are continuing to move along smoothly this morning. So just again to cover the missions that Endeavour has flown on, it first flew DM2, then Crew-2. Next up was Axiom-1, the first commercial astronaut mission to the International Space Station, which launched in April of 2022. Then Crew-6, which launched in March of 2023. And of course, now Crew-8, which will be returning home this evening in just about an hour and 15 minutes or so from now.
I want to point out here in this view that we have there, just above their heads in the background, we see some sticker patches those are the mission patches that are placed in the capsule by the previous crews. So you were mentioning all the other missions that this capsule has supported. Those were actually the mission patches, but in sticker form that we saw there in that previous shot. Now, Dragon Endeavour is named after the Space Shuttle Endeavour, which completed 25 missions into space. Some of Endeavour's missions included capturing and redeploying the stranded Intelsat 6 communication satellite, launching Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman astronaut into space, performing the first servicing mission for the Hubble Space Telescope, and delivering the Unity module to the International Space Station. So some big shoes to fill, and Space Shuttle Endeavour is the shuttle that is here in Los Angeles. We're eagerly awaiting for the new display to wrap up, and we'll be able to see it in its vertical launch position. But yeah, that's what this Dragon capsule is named after.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very much so looking forward to that being completed to check it out. I've seen a couple of the other space shuttles, but not that one just yet. And I did just want to make one quick correction. Splashdown is targeted for 12:29 a.m. Pacific time, so less than an hour from now. So we are looking forward to that. But as you mentioned, the next major milestone that we will look towards is that claw separation, and then the trunk being jettisoned, and then deorbit burn, nose cone deploy. So things are really going to start moving.
Deorbit sequence start.
And there you heard it.
That is great news. So that call out indicates that the entire sequence, some of those events Sandra just mentioned, is now beginning. So it's not necessarily the deorbit burn. It's a little confusing there. It is the deorbit sequence as a whole. So we're now in that phase, and like Sandra said, claw separation, which is the mechanism that keeps the trunk attached to the Dragon capsule, will be released, and we will jettison the trunk, which will leave the heat shield at the base of the pressurized section exposed, which is very important given that the heat shield is what is going to be doing the majority of the work during the re-entry phase.
Yes, absolutely. That heat shield is critical to the return of Crew-8 and every spacecraft that returns from space, because as the spacecraft re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, that plasma builds up around the spacecraft and very intense heat builds up at that point. But the heat shield helps to protect the crew, the cargo, whatever is in that spacecraft that is returning, so that it can either land or splash down after it makes its way through the atmosphere. And that re-entry into the atmosphere, it also helps to slow the spacecraft down immensely from its orbiting velocity down to just hundreds of miles per hour. And then right before Dragon splashes down, once parachutes deploy, it'll be going about 15 miles per hour. So it really slows down quite a bit in a short amount of time.
Now, coming up next, like we said, we are standing by for the call out for claw separation. We expect that to be in 1 minute at 11:34 p.m. Pacific time, 2:34 Eastern time. Just a few seconds after that will be the separation of the trunk. And then about 5 minutes after that, we will hear the call out telling us that the deorbit burn begins. This deorbit burn will last about 9 minutes, and that is the point in which the 4 forward Draco thrusters, so the 4 Draco thrusters located at the top of the Dragon capsule, will fire for that period of time to lock in, and basically that is the point of commitment for return for the Crew-8 crew. Once again, we are targeting a splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, so Gulf side this time. And that deorbit burn, once that's complete, then we can close the nose cone. For obvious reasons, we don't want to close the nose cone before the deorbit burn.
Yep, and that nose cone has actually been open since Dragon launched all the way back in March. It serves as, it has umbilicals attached to the International Space Station, also is the hatch that the crew floated aboard the International Space Station on. And as you mentioned, we are targeting Pensacola for splashdown today, and I'm hearing that the weather is just pristine. Winds are about 2 knots, which is 2 miles per hour, so very, very minimal winds. I expect that we'll see very low wave heights. And if you've been following along with this mission, you know that weather has been a watch item for us with this particular mission. There were a couple of hurricanes that moved through the Florida area, and then some additional storms that caused some of those parameters, whether it be winds, wave heights, precipitation, lightning. We look at all of these factors.
Nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon cabin.
All right. Great news there. So not only did we perform the claw separation, but we also jettisoned the trunk. And that call out there was from SpaceX Core, which is located there in SpaceX Mission Control Hawthorne, which is the view there. Those are our operators that are on console monitoring and controlling Dragon. And yeah, so that is a good call out. So next up will be the deorbit burn. Like I said before, this will last 9 minutes long, and everything so far is looking good for splashdown of Crew-8.
Yep, and with that trunk separation being confirmed, that means that telemetry is now looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is exposed and ready for atmospheric reentry. Again, that's very important. The trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through its solar cells and converting that to battery power. And since we will be separating the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we don't need to since we're coming home, and Dragon does have enough battery power already stored up ahead of that deorbit burn.
Next up, the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to reentry, the slew or maneuver to deorbit burn, and the attitude and the deorbit burn itself. This is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are, like I said before, those 4 thrusters that are located on top of the spacecraft, it is the last time that those will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown site off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, and will last about 9 minutes once it begins. We anticipate that to initiate at 11:39 p.m. Pacific time, 2:39 a.m. Eastern time. So we're standing by right now. Everything continues to look good. We will, of course, bring you views inside Dragon capsule once we get them again, but sometimes due to ground station coverage, we are unable to do so. So unfortunately, you're stuck with Sandra and I.
And I am hearing that Dragon is in that deorbit burn attitude. So just another milestone as we plug ahead this evening. And it's very important that that angle is correct for the deorbit burn, because if you go too high or too low in the atmosphere, you're not going to come in at that right trajectory and have the heat shield be able to do its job. And then, of course, you wouldn't be splashing down in the targeted zone. So Dragon is in that deorbit burn attitude, and we will stand by for the deorbit burn to begin in just about a minute from now.
Once again, that deorbit burn is what locks the capsule into its landing site. Of course, like Sandra mentioned earlier, we have been watching weather for quite some time. We were, everyone's excited to bring Crew-8 home, but only going to do that if the weather allows and is safe for both the crew on board as well as the recovery teams. And so it has been a little bit of a waiting game, but everything is looking good weather-wise, and we are locked into Pensacola, Florida. And this deorbit burn, which will last 9 minutes, is what is basically the last firing of the 4 forward Draco thrusters. Again, those are the ones located at the top of the capsule. And once that is complete, we will be able to close the nose cone. It's important to do this before the Dragon capsule begins to experience aerodynamic heating as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. It's important to get that nose cone closed so that we are able to protect the forward hatch and all of those components there during that re-entry phase. Like we mentioned before, that is a period of high heating, and so we really want to make sure that that nose cone gets closed in time. And it usually takes about anywhere between 6 to 8 minutes in order for that nose cone to close. So while we are under an hour from splashdown, once again, we're targeting at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time, 3:29 a.m. Eastern time splashdown. So under an hour, and things are going to move fairly rapidly, even though you might hear us say things like, this is going to last 9 minutes, this will last 8 minutes. It certainly goes fast.
Yep, absolutely. And so we are standing by for confirmation that that deorbit burn has begun. And I did just get that confirmation that the deorbit burn is underway. That burn is slated to last less than 9 minutes, 8 minutes and 20 seconds, so just under 9 minutes there. So as a little quick recap, within the last 10 minutes, Dragon has jettisoned its trunk and initiated the deorbit burn just seconds ago. For these operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinated with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We do want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to astronauts and Dragon, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those if they come too close. So for the safety of the crew and your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch as we'll be bringing you the very best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
As I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Endeavour has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn that's coming up that has initiated is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site right off the coast of Pensacola. Right now, Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, Draco thruster firings, and trajectory details like entry angle, spacecraft perigee, and how much distance remaining until deorbit burn termination. Right now, Dragon is flying itself, so all that the crew has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things. Although, if I were at one of those window seats, I would be pretty tempted to want to get my face right up next to the window.
Yes, hopefully they're enjoying their last less than an hour in space. They did have about 34-hour period from undocking to when they will splash down. So the crew had the opportunity to get out of those spacesuits, have a meal, get some rest. But right now they are suited up as we call this a dynamic period of the flight. So during launch, the crew is suited up, during the docking, during undocking, and then during splashdown operations. So NASA and SpaceX did jointly select the primary splashdown location off the coast of Florida. So as we discussed a little bit already, this selection process works with a lot of different variables, including space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members.
We'll start with, we've got some more views there inside the capsule. We can see the crew there keeping tabs on things with the touchscreen displays. Doing a little fist pump there was Commander Matthew Dominick. I think they're excited to come home. Like we mentioned before, this is the longest human spaceflight mission in a Dragon capsule that has been performed so far. So, this is a cool view because we can actually see indications there. The 2 outward screens that show which Draco thrusters are firing. So it's an opportunity for the crew to keep live tabs on what is happening with the thrusters just above their heads. Now, getting back to the return or the splashdown sequence, we start calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for reentry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations and preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
And we are now over halfway through that deorbit burn. Dragon is using its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude lowering maneuvers and to line it up with the selected primary site off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in that we'll need to avoid, but we don't have any of that happening today. And weather is something we are constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. So for the Crew-8 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside Dragon and for the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying free today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we're in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And that deorbit burn is underway, and we are just awaiting confirmation that it is wrapped up.
We expect this to complete at 11:48 p.m., so just about 2 minutes until this deorbit burn finishes. Once again, our live views inside the Dragon Endeavour capsule with the Crew-8 team inside. These views here, so we can actually see there in the center console, that is basically a trajectory tracker for showing them where they anticipate to splash down. But the view that I particularly love are the Draco firings there on either side of that center console.
And we were getting a good view of Matt. Oh, there we are, right on time. A good view of Matt Dominick. He is the commander of Endeavour. This is his first space flight, and I have just so enjoyed seeing the photography that he has been able to capture.
Been incredible.
Yes, if you have not seen it, please do go check out our social media pages, our Flickr account. He really took to the photography during his mission and has captured some just breathtaking, spectacular, marvelous images. I think the only thing that could be better is if I were able to see it with my very own eyes from up there.
Now we are standing by for the completion of the deorbit burn. For those that have just recently joined us, we have already separated from the trunk. We've jettisoned that trunk to expose the heat shield at the base of the pressurized section of the Dragon capsule. Of course, that pressurized section is the section that we see here on our camera views, where the Crew-8 crew sits. We expect the deorbit burn to complete here in the next 60 seconds or so. This was a 9-minute-long burn, and it is the final burn that lines up the trajectory for the Dragon capsule with the targeted splashdown site. The final firing of the 4 Draco thrusters at the top of the capsule.
Deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Dragon copies.
And great news, we did hear that that deorbit burn is now complete. Dragon is committed to coming home. So next up, we will have the nose cone that does close up.
This will take a couple minutes to complete. We have a series, basically 12 hooks on the nose cone that will lock in with the Dragon capsule, and those will close in a series in 2 different series, so 6 each.
Yep, and those are those same nose cones that were nose cones. The same hooks, yeah. The same hooks that were used yesterday to actually unhook from the International Space Station, and as it backed away, if you were tuning into our coverage for that. So in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for re-entry. Also, the vehicle will begin to initiate that nitrox suit purge. This helps Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander stay cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes or so from now. At this point, the nose cone again is closing and protecting the forward hatch for re-entry. And the crew will continue to use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by that set of hooks, 12 in all. So we did hear that nose cone close is underway. We expect it to be closed in about a minute or so. And again, this nose cone has remained open since the crew launched all the way back in March. This was nearly an 8-month mission that the crew spent aboard the International Space Station conducting science, performing research, investigations on not only themselves, but on a variety of topics from physics to flame studies. But it is interesting that the crew themselves actually is a part of the science experiment. The International Space Station has been continuously occupied for over 20 years, and we continue to learn more and more about how the body adapts to microgravity. And it looks like we are starting to see a view there of the nose cone as it does begin to close up. You can see that on your screen. Expecting that nose cone to be fully closed in just moments from now. And we'll stand by for that nose cone to go ahead and be closed up. Again, we expect that call out here in just a few seconds from now.
While this nose cone closure is underway, this is the final physical change that Dragon will undergo today. This, like we mentioned earlier, we jettisoned the trunk, and now we're closing the nose cone. And once that nose cone is closed, Dragon is basically in its final configuration and ready to begin its re-entry period through the Earth's atmosphere. As we mentioned earlier, that period is a period of time of a high dynamic loads or aerodynamic loads and heating. So the heat shield will be doing quite a bit of work during that time and helping to slow the capsule down significantly. In fact, right now they are still going at orbital velocity, and when they begin to re-enter the atmosphere is going to be pushing back on the capsule and helping to slow it down. And that energy turns into heat at the base of the heat shield, and that heat shield helps protect the crew and the capsule during that phase. By the time that the drogue parachutes deploy and help slow the capsule down even more, basically that re-entry period sees a deceleration from 17,500 miles per hour down to 350 miles per hour. So while the atmospheric re-entry is a we see the Dragon capsule come back with some, toasty marks on it. It's for good reason. It really actually helps do quite a bit of work to help slow the capsule down itself. So we are standing by actually I did just hear that we have confirmation that the nose cone is now closed. So nose cone closure is complete. And we basically move into the second half of entry. Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox into the air that is being delivered to the suits worn by Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander. Again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable while those external temperatures outside of Dragon reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. With the heat shield pointing forward, it is basically leading Dragon to the landing site. So we've been talking a little bit about the heat shield. Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. First gen PICA was actually initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
That's right, and SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pika-X, which was the second-gen product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply missions that successfully resupplied the International Space Station on 20 missions. Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass.
The remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during that reentry phase to ensure that the structural capabilities are maintained, and that also helps to make sure that our Dragon capsules are easily and rapidly reusable.
And while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS, or thermal protection systems, coupled with the ECLIS environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior, will ensure that Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through Splashdown. And again, we are now less than an hour away from Splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. Targeting that splashdown at 12:15 a.m. Pacific time. And we are now less than 20 minutes away from the start of that 7-minute blackout period where we won't have communications with the crew due to that blackout period as the ionization builds up around the heat shield we just discussed.
Now, after Dragon Endeavour has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, we will deploy a series of parachutes to help slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue parachutes, followed by
Nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon capsules, great news.
All right, great news there. Confirmation that all 12 hooks of the nose cone are in place and that nose cone is now secure and closed. So fast forwarding a little bit back to re-entry, and more specifically when we're deploying the parachutes, the first 2 parachutes that will come out are the 2 drogue chutes, and those will be followed by the 4 main parachutes that will help guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching back in March 4th to be exact. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they are at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. Vehicle velocity when the main chutes deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at 6,500 feet. And then vehicle velocity at water splashdown is approximately 16 miles per hour. And the highest G load the crew will experience during reentry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs.
So we are standing by for initiation of the next thing we'll have coming up is that loss of signal that occurs as the capsule begins to come back through the Earth's atmosphere, like you mentioned before, the ionization. Right now, we actually have a view there of mission control here in Hawthorne. Those are the Dragon controllers sitting on console, monitoring Dragon's progress, as they have been all throughout the mission. We have Dragon controllers on console 24/7 while Dragon is on orbit. And this view here is actually a view from our recovery vessel, Megan, a beautiful moonshot. Wow, that is super clear and very cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. The recovery team did deploy out to the vessel a short time ago, about an hour before splashdown, and some members do go a little sooner than that. It just depends on the role. But there's an entire team that helps to support the splashdown, and we'll talk through all those operations. You'll see a lot of the folks on camera this evening, but it looks like they are getting a beautiful view of the moon and soon to be a beautiful view of Crew-8 as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Now, sometimes sometimes we do have a path in which Dragon re-enters over places that it can be seen. This one, unless you are in the southern tip of Mexico, it's not a great view for the coastal United States, but if you are in the southern tip of Mexico, you might have a chance of seeing it. Or if you're on a boat in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, look up and see it'll look like a very bright comet or shooting star streaking through the Earth's atmosphere as it re-enters.
So this view, once again, coming to us from our recovery vessel Megan out in the Gulf. We will actually also have views of the capsule re-entering from this vessel as well, we hope. We also have, like Sandra mentioned, in terms of the trajectory, we have a tracker that we are utilizing to follow Dragon Endeavor's progress as it continues to work through its next steps. Once again, we have successfully jettisoned the trunk. We have completed the 9-minute deorbit burn. We have closed the nose cone, and we are now standing by for Dragon entry, as well as the loss of signal. That is a period of time in which the Dragon capsule is coming through at orbital velocity, coming through the Earth's atmosphere, and plasma begins to build up on the bottom of the heat shield, and basically it prevents us from communicating with the Dragon capsule or receiving communications from the Dragon capsule. So we call it a blackout period just because it's a brief period of time in which we are unable to hail the crew, but we anticipate that to begin at 12:25 a.m. Pacific time and apologies, I'm getting my numbers wrong here. That is actually the time in which we anticipate to acquire the signal. We anticipate to lose the signal at 12:15 a.m. Eastern Pacific time. Or 3:17 a.m. Eastern time. So all that being said, we're going to follow Dragon's progress, and we are going to stand by and take a moment to pause and listen to the nets as we await that moment of loss of signal. We will continue to monitor the nets and stand by and watch Dragon's progress.
Dragon SpaceX for entry briefing.
Dragon's ready.
All right, and Never, good to report that there are no deltas to the timeline. The team right now is tracking no issues on Dragon, and our landing site weather still looking beautiful with a wind speed of 3 knots, a wave height of half a foot, and a wave period of 6 seconds. How copy?
That is tremendous, tremendous news. We're going to go visors down, our sights have secured, and our restraints are tightened.
Copy that, Dragon. Crew entry preparations are complete.
Dragon copies.
All right, so great news there as we heard SpaceX Core call up to the Crew-8 team, letting them know that there are no changes to the anticipated timeline. So still tracking a 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time splashdown off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. We also heard great news about the weather. It's pretty calm. While we haven't seen the view of the water surface yet, I have a feeling it's going to be rather glass-like based on the description of a 0.6 wave height and 3 knots of wind speed. So all in all, really good news, and it's still looking great. Like I mentioned, 12:29 a.m. Pacific time. So 22 minutes from now, we'll have the Crew-8 crew back on Earth.
Yes, and that comes after a mission duration of 235 days in space. The crew traveled 99 million statute miles during that time period. They saw the arrival of 8 visiting vehicles and the departure of 8 visiting spacecraft. Some of those were crewed spacecraft with other crew members on board. Some of those were cargo resupply missions. So it has certainly been a very busy increment for them. There was also one spacewalk that took place with NASA astronaut Mike Barratt and NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who has since returned back to Earth. But that spacewalk did last 31 minutes. And Barratt has now conducted 3 spacewalks in his career for a total of 5 hours and 37 minutes in all.
That's really impressive. So once again, for those that have just recently joined us, the Crew-8 capsule Dragon Endeavour is making its way back to Earth. We are anticipating a splashdown of 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. The next event that we have coming up will be the anticipated loss of signal. This is a brief, about a few minute long period in which we are unable to communicate with the capsule or the crew. This happens every time we bring a Dragon capsule back to Earth. We anticipate the loss of signal to begin at 12:15 a.m., so just 6 minutes from now, and that is a result of the plasma that's building up on the exterior of the capsule. It's a moment in which it gets really hot on the outside. The external temperatures can reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but thanks to the thermal protection systems around the exterior of the Dragon capsule, as well as the cool air that's being flowed through the suits that the Crew-8 astronauts and cosmonaut are wearing, they stay relatively comfortable and cool during the entry phase, so nothing to worry about there. But we do anticipate the acquisition of signal to come back at 12:22 a.m. for a total of a roughly 7-minute period of blackout. That's not exact. Sometimes we're able to get comms back a little bit earlier, so you'll actually hear SpaceX Core, the crew operations and resource engineer. That is the voice that we've been hearing throughout the events today, speaking to Commander Dominick. You'll actually hear the SpaceX Core begin to hail the crew a little bit earlier, just to see if we get those comms back.
Yep, absolutely. And so the crew is suited up during this portion of the flight, and they will remain through all the actual splashdown and once they're removed from Endeavour as well. But the spacesuit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. So if that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitable environment long enough for the crew to return home.
5 minutes until anticipated LOS. We'll see you on the other side at 0723 Zulu.
Dragon copy 0723 Zulu. See you on the other side.
Good readback.
And those words from the Corps here in Hawthorne up to the Crew-8, particularly to Matt Dominick, who is the commander of Endeavour, letting them know that they'll see them on the other side of that blackout period, expected to end at 12:23 a.m. Pacific time this morning. So again, the spacesuit does help to protect the crew if needed. It is flame resistant as well. In the outer layer also helps to protect the crew in any event of a fire. It's also custom tailored and is a single piece suit. This means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached. The helmet is made from 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open. The quick disconnect, or QD, on the right thigh mates to an umbilical on the seat and provides air for ventilation, oxygen, nitrox for pressurization, and allows for the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. A tubing network inside the suit delivers air to the neck and limbs to keep the crew cool while wearing the spacesuit. And the suit's communication system consists of helmet-mounted microphones and in-ear speakers, which the crew has been using to communicate with the ground. It takes less than 15 minutes to put on the spacesuit, and this is what we call an intravehicular activity, or IVA suit, designed for use inside Dragon. When the astronauts move onto the International Space Station, the suits do stay on board Dragon. And then the astronauts wear NASA's extravehicular activity suit, or EVA spacesuit, when outside the International Space Station conducting those spacewalks. So everything continuing to go smoothly this morning. We are awaiting the next major milestone, which is the blackout period, when the crew does begin to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and we'll start to feel some of that pull of gravity for the first time in nearly 8 months since their launch back in March.
Live view there of the team on console continuing to monitor Dragon as it makes its way back to Earth. That is SpaceX Mission Control, located in Hawthorne, California. And like I said, it's where our teams monitor Dragon, checking in on all of its systems, help make sure that the crew has a safe journey. Our team in Mission Control follow their progress all along the way. On console or headset are 6 key positions who are monitoring the health of the vehicle and the crew. The mission director is responsible for mission success and is in charge of that room. The person that we hear talking to the team up in space is the Crew Operations and Resources Engineer, or CORE. The other positions are focused on vehicle systems like navigation, control, avionics, software, propulsion, life support, and of course communications with the ground segments. So lots of specific roles being filled there at the Mission Control in SpaceX.
Yes, absolutely. And I am hearing that Dragon has slewed to the final entry attitude and is beginning that entry interface period. So we'll stand by as this blackout period begins, and then of course, we'll catch the crew with those comms on the other side of it. So in addition to Mission Control Hawthorne, there is Mission Control Houston, a very familiar place for me, which is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There you do see a shot of Mission Control Houston on your screen. Team members here are trained in a variety of disciplines and monitor all of the space station systems. And just like Mission Control at SpaceX, we have someone dedicated to talk to the crew members, to streamline communications. This keeps the astronauts from needing multiple conversations on different subjects. This role is the CAPCOM, which stands for Capsule Communicator. However, this person isn't actually talking with the spacecraft. That's SpaceX's core. The Capcom is speaking with the astronauts already living aboard the International Space Station. And the Capcom does sit right next to the flight director. The flight director gathers information and data from all flight controllers and leads the team through major milestones. They approve or decline suggestions based on pre-established flight rules. Other key members include the ADCO, who controls the attitude or orientation of the space station. We also have the visiting vehicle officer, or VVO, who monitors the work and works with external teams sending spacecraft to and from the International Space Station. There's also a flight surgeon who works with the astronauts to get a chance to speak with them on a regular schedule on private medical conferences. We also have Robo, who works with the Canadarm2 to maneuver it to complete work outside of the space station. When astronauts are on a spacewalk, the Canadarm2 is maneuvered by an astronaut within the International Space Station. And there are many other positions and team members who monitor the station's solar arrays, the astronauts' schedules, and even where every single piece of equipment and cargo is stored. So it takes a tough and competent team to make a mission successful. And we now are in entry interface and do have that loss of signal with the crew. Again, this is expected as they make their way through the Earth's atmosphere. It will last just a few minutes, and then we'll begin to hear the ground call up to the crew for a comm check. Sometimes that comes a little sooner than expected, sometimes a little later. It just depends. But we do expect to regain communications with the crew once we are out of this entry interface period.
Right now, the crew on board Dragon Endeavour, of course, our team of Crew-8, the 3 NASA astronauts and 1 Roscosmos cosmonaut, they are themselves monitoring the entry phase. They are following along with the touchscreen on the inside of the pressurized section, that touchscreen monitor that they continue to follow progress with. Earlier, we saw it as the 4 forward thrusters were firing during the deorbit burn. So now they continue to monitor that. They are adjusting their cameras in preparation for drogue shoot deploy. They are also continuing to monitor velocity and basically keep tabs on how things are progressing. Like we mentioned, the period of loss of communication, which is what we are now in, we anticipate that to end, also known as AOS, or acquisition of signal. We expect that to occur at 12:23 a.m. Pacific time, 3:23 a.m. Eastern time. We might hear SpaceX core begin to hail the crew a little bit before that. We also might hear our commander, Dominick, also say hey before we even begin hailing them. So this period of blackout varies from mission to mission. It's not super precise, so we will attempt to regain those communications at the earliest reasonable opportunity, but this is totally expected. This is what happens every time we bring a Dragon capsule back through to Earth. The temperatures can reach upward of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why we see, once the Dragon splashes down, we see that the exterior, which was a nice pristine white at liftoff, and while it was on orbit, becomes more like a toasted marshmallow after it comes back. We see that thermal protection system having done its job in protecting the structure of the capsule as well as the astronauts inside. So for those that have recently joined us, we are in the expected blackout period. We anticipate this to end at 12:23 a.m. Pacific. The team there on your screen, located at SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California, as well as the team in Houston at Johnson Space Center, continue to monitor. Like I said before, the Crew-8 team is also monitoring using their systems as well. Prior to prior to this dynamic event, they had already closed their visors. They had already stored the tablets and any other loose items, including the zero-G indicator, of course. So they are well prepared. And like we mentioned, they will remain in their suits until after they splash down and after the recovery team retrieves them from the water and helps them egress from the capsule. Once again, we are anticipating a splashdown off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, so in the on the Gulf side of Florida. Our recovery vessel Megan is standing by, waiting for the Crew-8 cohort to return. The recovery team, actually, there's our first view of Dragon Endeavour making its streaking appearance across the sky. This view comes to us from the recovery vessel, Megan, as I mentioned earlier.
And we actually do have a very special guest, Shaniqua Vereen, a public affairs officer at the Johnson Space Center. She's on the boat right now. Shaniqua, can you hear us okay? And let us know what you are seeing right now as we watch Crew-8 streak through the atmosphere about to splash down. Let us know what you're seeing.
Yes, Sandra. Hi. I hope you guys can hear me loud and clear. I am on the recovery vessel Megan, as you stated. We are getting our first views here on the ship as well. I'm with NASA photographer who is seeing the navigation lights as well as the streaking across the sky. It's a pretty exciting time right now on the recovery vessel. All personnel that's not on the FAST are up at the front of the hull of the ship, just watching it as it comes in. Again, the Megan is stationed about 3 miles, about 1.5 nautical miles away from the splashdown zone, and we're looking to have the crew splash down in just about, 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes? And so we're catching all the views until the parachutes deploy and they splash down in the ocean.
That is so excellent, Shaniqua. I am jealous of the view. I mean, it's beautiful on our screen, but I can't even imagine what it looks like in person. So soak that in, enjoy that moment. We are expecting to regain communications from the crew in about a minute or so. We might start to hear some of those calls out from the ground or from Matt Dominick, the commander of Crew Dragon Endeavour, as they come out of this blackout period. But again, we're continuing to get great views of Crew-8 as they are re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Again, standing by to regain those communications, expecting that in about a minute or so.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Loud and clear. How are
We have you the same.
Great news there. Communication blackout period over. We heard the voice of Commander Matthew Dominick. Now coming up at 12:25 a.m. Eastern, or excuse me, Pacific, 3:25 a.m. Eastern, we will deploy the drogue parachutes. Now, frame of reference, prior to the period, coming through the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon is on GPS. Expect automated chute deployment at nominal altitude.
Dragon copies.
All right, just a call out there, letting the crew know how Dragon is calculating the when and how to release the parachute. So the drogue chutes are going to come out first. There are 2 of them. This occurs around when the capsule is going about 350 miles per hour or so, roughly about there. Those will deploy, and then about a minute or 2 later, the main parachutes, about a minute later, the main parachutes will deploy, and that at that point in time, the capsule will be going about 120 or so miles per hour. So those drogue parachutes do quite a bit of work as well to help stabilize and slow the Dragon capsule down. So standing by now for deployment of the drogue parachutes.
Brace for drogue window.
Dragon bracing.
And this view again is from the WB-57. That's one of our high altitude planes as it continues to track Dragon ahead of those drogue parachutes being deployed. And shortly after that, we'll see the main parachutes deployed. But we'll stand by for those drogues to go ahead and get deployed. We are hearing that Dragon has good pitch and yaw stability, so everything continuing to go really smoothly, targeting that splashdown at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time, so just about 4 minutes or so from now.
Once again, there we can see that the drogue parachutes, thanks to that WB-57 views, drogues are deployed. We can see two good-looking drogues. Oh, this is a great view from inside the parachute bay where those drogue parachutes...
Drogue chute descent rate nominal.
Next,
Dragon copies.
those drogue chutes will next pull out the main parachutes, and we'll see those 4 main parachutes open and inflate. Once again, Dragon is, we can see deployment there of the 4 main parachutes. Dragon is doing this autonomously, releasing each set of parachutes. We can now see those 4 main parachutes begin to inflate. Pretty incredible to see how, as those main parachutes inflate, the capsule itself slows down even more significantly.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
Copy. Nominal descent rate 1,000 meters.
Copy, 1,000.
We will continue to hear call-outs from Commander Matt Dominick of the distance from the water. Those parachutes really doing their job now, as you mentioned, Kate, starting to slow the spacecraft down even more and more. By the time the crew actually does splash down in the water, they'll be going about 15, 16 miles per hour. So those parachutes really taking on that air to slow down the spacecraft.
800 meters.
Copy, 800.
Like you said, Commander, Matt Dominick will continue to report altitude every 200 meters. So we just heard the 800 meter call out.
And we also heard that the descent rate was nominal or as expected. Another good call.
100 meters.
A good call out there.
Copy, 600.
Continuing to get great views from the WB-57 as Crew-8 is nearing splashdown.
400 meters.
Copy, 400.
Meters, bracing.
Copy, 200 and braced.
At this point in time, the seats in Dragon have rotated a little bit to help provide a more comfortable and safer bodily orientation for the crew members as they come closer to splashdown. Like we said before, the capsule's going about 15 or 16 miles per hour.
And splashdown.
And Endeavour, we see the same. On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
And as you can see on your screen, we do have visual confirmation.
SpaceX team, what an incredible ride.
Again, we do have visual confirmation of Crew-8 successfully splashing down after 235 days in space. They are now back on Earth. Dragon Endeavour has returned home, and NASA astronauts Matt Dominick, Mike Barratt, and Jeanette Epps, and Rocosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin are back on Earth after an approximately 34-hour return journey from space.
As you can see, SpaceX recovery ship and team have been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now making their way to the splashdown location. Teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take about 30 minutes for them to make their way to Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander. They're inside Dragon. We can see there the recovery lights shining some light onto the Dragon capsule. Now, immediately after splashdown, the Dragon capsule automatically cuts the lines.
Dragon, we show water operating flight control state.
SpaceX copies. We see the same.
So that was just Commander Matt Dominick reporting the orientation in which Dragon is now in, which we see there on your screen. Like I mentioned before, the Dragon capsule automatically cuts.
SpaceX, we stable 1.
Copy and concur. Stable 1.
Dragon automatically cuts the lines to the parachutes, so we will see some of the recovery team in the fast boats, which are now approaching the splashdown site. We'll see a couple of those boats divert over to where the parachutes landed, as we will retrieve those from the water. We will also see a fast boat approach the Dragon capsule. That team is responsible for making sure that there are no remaining hypergolic residue on the capsule after it has spent significant time in space. Those hypergolic propellants are what are used to maneuver Dragon on orbit, and they are toxic to people here on Earth. And so we want to make sure that the recovery team is safe, so we'll see that fast boat approach and perform initial safety checks to make sure there are no hypergolic residuals there on the exterior of the capsule. We'll then see that team begin to rig up the Dragon capsule with some fittings, some straps that will ultimately be utilized to lift the capsule on board our recovery vessel, Megan.
And we did have a good view there just a minute ago, and you can kind of see it here. The water is almost mirror-like. It's quite smooth. Very beautiful weather there off the coast of Pensacola for these recovery operations. So as you mentioned, they are going to begin to assess capsule safety. We do see some of those fast boats begin to approach, and they're going to do some of those sniff checks, make sure that everything is as expected before they continue with the operations of bringing Dragon closer to the recovery vessel and then eventually lifting it on. So we are now eagerly awaiting the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Matt Dominick, Mike Barratt, and Jeanette Epps, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin inside. So Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown, and we are continuing to see those views of the fast boats. They do have the go to approach. So for those of you just joining us, the mission has gone smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of Pensacola at 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:39 a.m. Eastern this morning.
Dragon, SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in approximately 1 minute.
Dragon, you guys are fast.
I always love that call out because, you know, it is not common to have people on the outside of your spaceship. So I love that we just give the team a heads up that they should expect people to begin climbing around their Dragon capsule. Now, approximately 34 hours ago, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, And then, as we saw just a little bit ago, performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, which placed the Dragon capsule on a trajectory toward Pensacola, Florida. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. So we're now going to follow along with the final part of Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander's journey as Dragon is prepared to be lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat.
And you might have heard a call out a couple of minutes ago for something called Stable 1. There's a couple of different configurations that Dragon can land in. Stable 1 is the configuration that we are hoping for. So this means it's in the ocean and upright as expected, as you see on your screen as the lights do shine on it. So those fast boats continuing to approach and get closer. These will be the first human beings that Crew-8 has seen outside of their spacecraft since they were being strapped in ahead of launch by the closeout team at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically did release the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. And then Dragon automatically safed its pyrotechnics still present on the spacecraft and automatically performed additional minor system reconfigurations if needed. So the astronauts will remain seated and in their spacesuits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperature regulated inside the spacecraft so they can be comfortable, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate, and we'll likely hear some of those calls back and forth from the ground to the crew inside Endeavour.
Yeah, you mentioned the automatic cutting of those parachute lines. We often talk about how Dragon is autonomous and how it does things itself, but the crew is always there monitoring and ensuring that things are going as planned. So actually, one of the first actions that they have upon splashdown is to listen for the cutting of those lines. And so if for some reason we confirm that the parachutes were unable to be released, the crew inside has the ability to do that manually. So just because they splash down doesn't mean their job is over. Now, in this view here, we can see some of the recovery team there in the fast boats that got that go to approach. We have 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which you see there, that have moved rather quickly to that splashdown point. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. We put it upwind just in case there are any residual hypergolic elements there on the exterior of the capsule. So putting the larger recovery vessel upwind before having the confirmation that there are no residuals. Key safety check there. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles. Their first view of our second fast boat. The first one is focused on immediate safety inspection of the spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of those hypergolic propellant vapors. And this helps ensure that it's safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon as well as the rest of the recovery team. Once Dragon...
Hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with the ship flight surgeon and Hawthorne flight surgeon.
Dragon.
All right, great news there. So we got confirmation that those safety checks are complete. So we'll now see the recovery team begin to place the required straps and harnesses around, as you can see there, around the Dragon capsule. We also heard confirmation that the words that were used were unfired ordnance. Those are those pyrotechnics that are utilized to fire the parachutes at the appropriate time, so confirmation that those have been saved. And we also heard PMC, that stands for Private Medical Conference, and that is an opportunity to speak with the flight surgeon and to give a rundown on how the crew is feeling. As we mentioned earlier, we have 3 spaceflight rookies, although they're not rookies anymore now that they're back on Earth, and 1 veteran, so Michael Barratt. This is he has now completed 4 space flights. So it's a good opportunity even for everyone to check in with the surgeon and let them know how they're feeling. And of course, that is private. Now, we did get that all clear for full approach. So like I said, that you can see that the team beginning to rig up the spacecraft for the recovery by the recovery ship. That second fast boat, which we see coming in and out of screen, is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first fast boat. We'll also get to see a team member on a jet ski helping to gather up those parachutes that are now detached.
And it will take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. But once complete, the crew will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted onto the recovery vessel. And again, we do see that rigging process underway. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft, as you see, so they can attach all those hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So it does typically take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. And after medical checkouts, once on board, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter.
Dragon to ground is now public.
Copy, Dragon, copy.
So after they return to land by helicopter, the crew will fly by plane back to Houston, where they will be reunited with their friends and their family, and then complete their post-flight period. And so, again, we were getting some great views of Crew-8 after they splashed down. We'll probably get some more great views here momentarily. But everything went very, very smooth this morning. The crew did splash down off the coast of Florida at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time this morning, following their undocking from the International Space Station yesterday. They did have a 34-hour time period in which they were returning back to Earth, now back home safe and sound after 235 days in space, 3 of whom it was their very first time in space. And so this is a view of Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California. The core was the main individual that has been speaking with the crew following their undocking from the International Space Station yesterday. We'll continue to hear some of those calls back and forth from the core, the crew operations resource engineer here at Hawthorne. Particularly to Matt Dominick. He is the commander of Crew Dragon Endeavour, so he is the main astronaut that will speak with the core. And it looks like we are getting our first view there on the recovery vessel Megan. That circular object that you see in the center of your screen there, that is actually what we call the Dragon's Nest. That is where the Endeavour spacecraft will be lifted up and placed into. That's why we had to do that rigging ahead of this operation. We had to make sure that all of the harnesses were properly installed in order to hoist Dragon up into the Dragon's Nest.
Now, you mentioned communicating with the crew. We actually have a team member on board the Dragon, or excuse me, on board Megan, the recovery vessel that you see there. Shaniqua Vereen, we heard from her a little bit earlier during the just before splashdown. I can't wait to hear how the actual splashdown was. Shaniqua, can you fill us in on what it was to experience that?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. I actually repositioned myself from the front of the boat to the back of the boat so I can see the Dragon's Nest and actually have eyes right now on Dragon Endeavour. Everything as far as splashdown was perfect. It was nominal. We could see the bright dragon in the sky coming back to Earth, and it was pretty extraordinary from my point of view. It's entered the atmosphere. We then heard 2 sonic booms, and then pretty soon after we saw some navigational lights, red and then green, and then we saw some parachutes deploy here on the Megan. We then tracked Dragon as it slowly propelled down into the ocean. From here, you guys have been following along a little bit more. I had some better views, I think, of you guys. We tracked we tracked the Endeavor down, and we actually saw the parachutes from the fast boat being dragged a little bit here as they were clearing out the area for us to be able to recover Dragon. Again, you guys went over a little bit, but after we got all clear, the fast boats went in to make sure that there was no hypergolic leaks, that propellant leaks, and then we're right now inching closer and closer to the vessel as we see. I don't know if you guys have views right now, but as we're inching closer, we're backing the Megan closer to the Dragon Endeavor where it sits right now in the ocean.
Yeah, Shaniqua,
the recovery force. Sorry, go ahead.
I think we have a very similar view currently as you. We are also looking off the aft end of the recovery vessel. We see a couple crew members there next to the Dragon's nest, and we can also see the Dragon capsule. So I have a feeling that you're standing pretty close to the camera we got views from.
Yes, absolutely. And Shaniqua, we have all been tracking this weather pretty closely throughout the return journey for Crew-8. From my perspective, those seas look like glass. Can you tell us about the landing conditions from your perspective?
Yes, so we had optimal conditions to actually bring Dragon home today and splash down off the Pensacola coast. The conditions have been more than favorable, I would say. We expected a little chill to be in the air. We're all buckled up in sweatshirts and hoodies here, and it's actually a smooth, 76 degrees. Beautiful, calm ocean as well as clear skies tonight. We had a couple of the flight docs pointing out the constellations as we were waiting for Endeavor to actually come in view. So it's been pretty amazing and clear. Just blue water. I was looking for dolphins or jumping fish off the side of the boats this time. I had that view a couple recoveries ago, and didn't happen this time, but still quite a sight to view.
Oh, that is just so wonderful to hear, Shaniqua. I do hope you bring some of that cool weather back home to Houston for us both, and I hope you get the chance to see your dolphin too. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Best of luck to you with the rest of the recovery. We're going to continue to follow along and keep up those live views. But thank you again for joining us. That was Shaniqua Vereen, Public Affairs Officer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And so we are continuing to get these views of Endeavor as it gets closer and closer to the Megan recovery vessel. We're continuing to see some of those lights from the recovery personnel around the spacecraft, as well as some folks near the nest that will help with the actual lifting up process of bringing Dragon on board the Megan. And once Dragon is secure and on the recovery vessel, we'll actually see it scooch forward a little bit before the crew is actually removed from the spacecraft. But before that, we'll open up the hatches and we'll continue to walk through all of that. But I'm just glad that we are getting these great views.
Yeah, Shaniqua mentioned being able to see some aquatic life in the water. This is always fun to watch folks as we prepare the Dragon capsule to be lifted onto the deck of the recovery vessel. This is one of the moments that haunts my nightmares personally. Dark water, there may be, I know it's highly unlikely and it's one of those kind of fear things, but to me there's sharks in there and other scary oceanic beasts, but I think Shaniqua, it has more luck with the dolphin than scary aquatic beasts. That's just, in my head, that's what's there. So we can see their recovery team members standing by as they have already begun to prepare to lower the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism into the water, and that will help bring the spacecraft into that on-deck translation system, as you have heard us refer to as the nest. Dragon will remain in that nest during crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So what is not super clear from this view, the Dragon capsule will be lifted into that nest, and then that nest will translate toward the camera that we are looking from now. So that nest will translate toward the forward end of the recovery vessel, and that is where the extraction platform is located. The crew we can see there in the background is continuing to prepare the Dragon capsule. We can actually see one of the recovery team members. This is probably the best view we've had of them so far, but we can actually see one of the recovery team members on top of the capsule helping to secure the rigging and the straps necessary to safely lift the Dragon capsule out of the water.
And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the very first one to check in on Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander, just to see if they're ready for egress or getting out of the spacecraft. So Wall Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the space station, and that's kind of that pointy part that you're seeing at the top of the spacecraft. On the other end is the heat shield. The top hatch is used to connect to the space station. The astronauts will egress from Dragon's side hatch, pending capsule orientation in the water, which, as we see, is in stable one, so they will be able to use that side hatch. But there are multiple options, so if Dragon were to splash down in a different orientation, they could egress from the top hatch as well. So either option works, but today we will be using that side hatch. Before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment, but it actually is equalized because we're here on Earth. So once the hatch is opened, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding Dragon at the start of their mission all the way back in March, which is hard to believe. That was almost 8 months ago.
Yeah, time does fly. So this is a cool view here. I believe this is a drone shot that we have, and you can really get a sense of distance between the recovery vessel and the Dragon capsule and the speed at which the recovery vessel approaches Dragon. It is slow and steady, carefully choreographed, as pretty much everything in spaceflight is. And we can see the recovery team in the fast boat still working to prepare Dragon Endeavour to be lifted out of the water. We heard during the we heard in the post-deorbit burn debrief that the weather was really good. We can see that here live on screen. The wave height predicted was 0.6, so really mild. We can see almost a glass-like surface there on the water, and only a wind speed of only 3 knots. So overall, a beautiful evening for a Dragon to splash down.
And we are getting some good visuals there of the helicopter pad on top of the recovery vessel Megan there. You can see the green lights of the helicopter pad. Once the crew is out of the spacecraft, they will depart back to the coast of Florida on board a helicopter before flying back to Houston and being reunited with their families at Ellington Field in Houston. So continuing to get those really great views there. It looks like the rigger is still on Dragon, if I'm seeing that correctly.
Yeah, they're standing in the bay where the main parachutes were housed prior to being deployed.
That's right, and it looks like that rigger this evening is Troy Werner. So we might get the opportunity to see him as he jumps off of the spacecraft, which is Kate's worst nightmare.
Yes. A moment I feel things for that individual when I see them perform that, and it's really admiration that they have the bravery to do that, especially at night. Yeah, we can see him standing there in that bay where...
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Loud and clear, Hollis.
Loud and clear as well. Transition from audio from Tidris to Megan successful. Rigging has been complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Copy, 5 to lift.
Great news there, just giving the crew an anticipated timeline for the remainder of the recovery preparations. That lift sequence will happen quite quickly, so be sure to not turn away. The Dragon capsule will be lifted up and out of the water using those hydraulic arms, or that lift that you can see there at the end of the recovery vessel on the left-hand side of your screen. It'll then be placed in the Dragon's nest, which will then be translated toward the forward end of the vessel. And that all happens really from the moment that the Dragon capsule is lifted out of the water, basically about a minute, if my memory serves me correctly from previous recent recovery operations, about a minute for the nest, for the Dragon to be out of the water in the nest, and the nest to be translated to the forward end where the egress platform is located. Now, once the Dragon capsule is there next to the egress platform, we will perform another set of safety checks to make sure that there are still no hypergolic vapors present on the exterior of the capsule. So we'll do another one of those before allowing the team to open the side hatch. We can see the rigger there now atop the Dragon capsule. I wonder if they have the opportunity to kind of put their hand down there and wave. That is the side of the capsule where, oh, there they go, into the water.
Dragon, brace for capsule lift.
Dragon.
All right, lift now underway as we bring Dragon Endeavour out of the water. A great view from our drone. We can see the capsule now making its way toward the Dragon's nest, and there's a good view of that egress platform, so you get a better sense of how far that translation is. So you can see some seawater there resting in the main parachute bay. Once the Dragon is translated forward, we will see the team rinse off the capsule using fresh water to help arrest any corrosion that may be underway due to the presence of that salt water. Salt obviously being corrosive to metallics, and we want to prevent that as our Dragon capsules are reused.
And we are really starting to see kind of that toasted marshmallow effect because of re-entering into the Earth's atmosphere there. And then we did see a view of the side hatch. We'll continue to see that come into more view, especially as the Dragon is translated a little bit closer.
Dragon, welcome aboard the recovery vessel Megan. Recovery personnel are completing their final checks. Stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Dragon copies.
And so Crew-8 is now aboard the recovery vessel Megan after splashing down off the coast of Pensacola at 12:29 a.m. Pacific time this morning. The recovery vessel Megan is actually named after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur, who was selected as an astronaut in 2000. She flew on Space Shuttle STS-125, which was the final space shuttle mission to the Hubble Space Telescope. And it actually helped to successfully improve the Hubble's capabilities and extend its life. And then she also flew on Crew-2.
Yeah, she was actually the pilot for Crew-2. So we have two recovery vessels, one supporting Gulf operations, one supporting Atlantic operations, and this one is, as you just mentioned, named after Megan, and the other one is named after Shannon. So we've actually named these two recovery vessels after the first two women to fly on Dragon, on our Crew Dragon missions.
Yep, that is exactly right. And we are getting a visual there of recovery personnel working to plug up the Draco sections. Of course, those are no longer needed now that the crew is safely back on Earth. So they're working to plug those up as we continue our recovery operations this evening.
These drone views are pretty awesome. I particularly love how it's able to angle around the recovery vessel and provide a more holistic snapshot of the teamwork involved in recovering Dragon capsules. So with some camera views, we can see a couple individuals awaiting or doing certain preparations, and I love how we can kind of see more of the cohesive unit working together with these drone shots. We can see each individual performing their specific task. And this, of course, is something that the recovery team trains for extensively, both for daylight and nighttime operations. So this is something that each individual is well trained, well prepared for. And we can see now that the Dragon capsule is safely in the nest, like Sandra mentioned. We're going to be plugging up the Draco thruster outlets to help ensure that there are no hypergolic vapors that escape. We'll also perform another safety check, excuse me, to make sure it is safe for crew members to make a close approach. And we can see the team members removing some of the straps and the rigging that was necessary for capsule lift, but now unnecessary. And we will remove those to help clear the way to open the side hatch. A great view there of that side hatch. Once again, this side hatch has remained closed since the Crew-8 mission lifted off in March, early March of this year. They docked with the space station and egressed and ingressed from this capsule using the forward hatch, which is the hatch at the top of the capsule located below that nose cone. So the side hatch was never used while it was in space. So this will be the first time that that side hatch will be reopened since liftoff, and this will be the first breath of fresh air that the crew will have since lifting off, like you said, almost 8 months ago.
Yeah, that liftoff did take place on Sunday, March 3rd, and Crew-8 docked the following day on March 5th. Now, Crew-8 actually docked to the Harmony forward port, but throughout their mission, they did complete a port relocation, which is essentially moving the spacecraft from one port to another. And we are getting a really great view of Dragon as it is translated closer ahead of those recovery operations and opening up the hatch. Really spectacular view to see that.
Now, one thing I want to mention before we see the crew egress, it is important to note that Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander will be getting assistance as they exit or egress from the capsule. They will be getting assistance from...
Stand by for side hatch opening and egress.
Dragon.
All right. So like I was saying, the team will be getting assistance from the recovery folks that you see there while they exit the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, as returning to a gravity environment can, wreak havoc with our vestibular system, and which is responsible for maintaining balance and motion. So safety, of course, is our number one priority with this operation. So you'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft by one by one and assisted with the few feet to the medical quarters on board the boat. So nominal procedure is to open the hatch, do a quick thumbs up check with the crew inside, help them egress one by one, and they will then go into the medical quarters directly after egress to have their first in-person medical conference with the flight surgeons on board. So that will happen for all 4 crew members. Now, something you see there on the right-hand side of the egress platform, it is a rounded square. It's that white structure there off to the side. That is a piece of protective equipment that we will install once the side hatch is open. That will help protect the edges of the side hatch, help protect the seal, and also help protect the spacesuits and the crew members as they egress from the capsule. Now, the crew will will keep their helmets on, but they will flip their visors up.
Side hatch opening in progress.
Dragon.
All right, so we got the all clear from those safety checks, and we can see now that the crew has untorqued the side hatch. We see that being lifted. We can see that protective piece being put in place. Once again, nominal procedure is for each crew member to be assisted as they egress from the capsule.
And we'll also see those footrests be removed as well once we get a little further in this procedure. Once they get that protective cover installed, that just helps give a little more room as they help to bring the crew members out.
Yeah. As you can see, even folks that haven't spent 8 months in space need assistance getting out of the capsule.
Yes, and again, you will see the crew be assisted out of the spacecraft and have some folks around them. This is common for all of our landings, as well as for the Soyuz. If you've ever watched one of our broadcasts on that, we do assist the crew as they come out of any spacecraft following their space flight.
We can see the onboard photographer getting some snapshots. I have a feeling there may have been 4 thumbs up there inside the capsule at one point. Or maybe there will be now. This is also a great view. We can really see the details in the thermal protection system and that evidence of re-entry. So as we mentioned before, the exterior of the capsule at liftoff and while the capsule was on orbit was a nice white, and we can now see that discoloration reflecting the patterns of heat that the capsule experienced during re-entry. As we mentioned, the exterior temperatures can reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit as that plasma builds up. So I always love seeing how the Dragon capsules change identity essentially as they come back and kind of have their own unique fingerprint or TPS print, if you will, thermal protection system.
And we were talking about the other recovery vessel, Megan, and it turns out that Shannon Walker is actually on the recovery vessel as well, helping to assist with this, as well as NASA astronaut Eric Bowe. So
that's awesome. And she's the astronaut that the other vessel is named after.
Yep.
So we can see the recovery team continuing to place the assistive and protective pieces around the capsule. Like Sandra mentioned, we'll see those footrests come out. That helps provide a little bit more moving space for the team to assist the astronauts as they egress. And we'll probably see a wheeled mobility aid come into view here as well for each crew member.
So if you are just joining us this evening, Crew-8 has splashed down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida at 12:29 a.m., ending their 235 days in space. They have been successfully recovered from the water and hoisted up onto the recovery vessel Megan, and they are now working to get removed from the side hatch there that you see on your screen, which is now open. We have recovery personnel that are partially inside the capsule now, just doing a quick check-in with the crew before their extraction. Again, you do start to see some of that recovery equipment being wheeled off to the side there. That is completely normal and expected. We do this for all of our returning crew members after their space flight, so you will see them be assisted onto that before they are wheeled away to do some additional medical checks before boarding a helicopter and and flying back to Houston, rather back to the coast of Florida before they fly on a NASA plane to Houston to be reunited with their loved ones at Ellington Field.
Something I want to point out while we have this particular camera angle, we can see the window, the crew window there, kind of frosted over due to the effects of that high heating during re-entry. That is the side where Jeanette Epps is seated. Now, above that window, you see basically looks like this circular hole, and that is actually one of two bays, if you will, where the drogues are fitted into. So there's one on each side, as there are two drogue parachutes. And you can also see around the side of the hatch where the lines that connect the drogue parachutes to the main parachutes, you can see how those run around the edge of the side hatch as well. So kind of a cool view to show some of the re-entry systems, or excuse me, the re-entry and splashdown systems used for our astronaut return.
And it looks like we are starting to see the first crew member be extracted. I'm not sure if that will be Commander Matt Dominick or Mike Barratt, but it is typically one of those middle seats because they're easiest to reach. So again, you do see that crew member getting some assistance. I can't quite tell who it is just yet.
I can only imagine what it feels like to have to stand up after spending nearly 8 months in space and having to stand up for the first time with Earth's gravity.
And that is NASA astronaut Matt Dominick, who is now out of the spacecraft. His very first space flight. Looks like we're getting some handshakes there.
High fives all around. For those that have just recently joined us, you can see that the Dragon capsule carrying our Crew-8 members has successfully splashed down and been recovered from the splashdown site off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. We have just seen the egress or exit of Commander Matt Dominick, who was seated in one of the two center seats. We can see, so we're standing by for the egress of the other three crew members. And on your screen there, some of the recovery team and NASA folks there assisting with the egress. As we mentioned, we, just standard protocol, we always help individuals coming back from long duration spaceflight. We always help them, give them some assistance back to the medical base. So I can only imagine that it feels like 100 elephants standing on your shoulders as you have to stand up. This particular mission was in space for 235 days, 232 of them on station. And this ended up being the longest duration mission that Crew Dragon has ever performed. So kind of a cool first there.
And the longest U.S. spacecraft flight ever, whether that was through the shuttle program, Apollo, Mercury, Gemini. So that's a fun fact. And so it looks like they're working now to extract the next crew member. So we'll stand by to see who it is. But I do expect that it would be NASA astronaut Mike Barratt. But we'll confirm that just momentarily.
In addition to the individuals standing around the outside, there's also a recovery team member inside the capsule assisting with the egress.
And that is NASA astronaut Mike Barratt. This is he is the veteran on this space flight. The other 3 flyers on board Crew-8 were all rookies. And so in total, Mike Barratt has spent 447 days in space.
Saw some excitement there.
Yes. So remaining inside Endeavour is NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps, as well as Rocosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin. So we'll see who comes out next. You do see those footrests as they are removed from the spacecraft to give a little more space for recovery personnel to assist the crew members out.
I think it looks like we might be getting Jeanette Epps next.
So they're continuing to work to get the next crew member out, and you can really see there's quite a few folks on the recovery vessel. It just really speaks to all those that are involved with helping to make a mission successful. It's the recovery boat personnel, the folks in Mission Control Hawthorne and in Houston, as well as all around the world, those that support the International Space Station. It really is a huge team effort to have a successful mission like this. And in fact, there's 44 people on the recovery vessel, Megan, to help support tonight's splashdown.
Once again, we're standing by for the egress of our final 2 crew members. Yeah, it looks like NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps will be the next one to exit. Due to the limited space inside Dragon capsule, it's pretty normal to have the 2 individuals seated in the center seats, so the pilot and commander. It's pretty normal to have them egress first, as it helps give a little bit more working room there within the capsule for the crew members and the recovery team members.
And I do believe that is NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps who is next out. Yep, Jeanette Epps was the next one out, so Alexander Grebenkin will be next. Again, this was her first space flight. Some quick waves.
Round of applause.
And we are starting to see Alexander Grebenkin be extracted from the spacecraft as well. Some thumbs up. And we now have all 4 crew members outside of Crew Dragon Endeavour following their 235 days in space. Some cheers and excitement for Crew-8. That's great to see.
Checking to make sure they didn't leave anybody inside. No aliens as stowaways inside Dragon Endeavour.
Well, now that Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. Now, this all kicked off on March 4th, 2024 from historic Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander made a 29-hour flight on board Dragon to the International Space Station. Since arriving at the space station, they spent nearly 8 months as members of Expedition 71 and 72, where they executed science experiments, spacewalk, and repairs while aboard the orbiting laboratory.
Their journey home began about 34 hours ago on October 23rd when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 2:05 p.m. Pacific time. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning. We jettisoned Dragon's trunk and performed our final on-orbit maneuver, the approximately 9-minute-long deorbit burn, and that occurred at 11:39 p.m. Pacific, 2:39 a.m. Eastern Time, and that sent Dragon on its path home. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, on time at 12:29 a.m. Pacific, 3:29 a.m. Eastern. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in quickly and prepare Dragon Endeavour for its lift into the recovery vessel. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Matthew, Michael, Jeanette, and Alexander make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities safe and sound.
Next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore where they'll transfer to aircraft that will take them home. The astronauts will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston, and then they'll be reunited with their friends and family, bringing an end to this mission. It has been an honor and a privilege, the greatest privilege of my life, to get to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
Return today marks the end of the direct handover that we executed after successfully launching the Crew-9 mission to the space station on September 28th. Now, thank you, as always, for joining us for tonight's coverage of the splashdown of Crew-8. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA online and on social media for updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station.
And we'll continue to share the progress of Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander on social media as they travel back home. We also do have our post-splashdown media telecon coming up at 2 a.m. Pacific, 5 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, where leadership will share a final update as we conclude this successful mission. So from all of us at NASA and SpaceX, it has been great to support this mission. Welcome home, Crew-8. So long.